Hello and welcome to coverage of the 2016 World Championship. I'm Gabby Sparks, joined today by Ian Duke, and we're heading into the first round of standard. Excuse me. This is an interesting round because the players have been spending all of their life over the past couple of weeks prepping for this.
Yeah, it's also the culmination of the standard environment right
Exactly.
before we rotate with Kaladesh. So players have a lot of information under their belts from Pro Tour Eldritch Moon, and they've been tweaking and tuning those deck lists since then.
And in particular, it's difficult to prep for a tournament with so few people. You know, usually going into a tournament, you can take a look at metagame breakdown, and it'll be in a significant way, you'll be able to tell maybe how you can prepare. But in a field this small, it is very difficult to do so. So the players are sweating a little bit. They're about to find out whether or not their standard choices were good for this weekend. So let's head down to the match. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to coverage of the 2016 World Championship. I'm Gabby Sparks, joined today by Ian Duke. And our main match is going to be Kazuyuki Takimura. There you see him on the left side, Pro Tour champion this year. He will be facing off against Steve Ruben, also Pro Tour champion this year.
That's right. We
Our
got some pretty cool
players
decks here.
are ready, so let's get underway.
You have 60 minutes, you may begin. Good luck.
So the players are going to be playing Delirium versus Blue-Green Crush. And Blue-Green Crush, Ian, this is a pretty interesting one. Why didn't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, this is an awesome deck. Just definitely one of the most innovative here this weekend. It's kind of a ramp deck. You're seeking to kind of ramp up your mana as quickly as you can, eventually get to the point where you're casting Crush of Tentacles, as well as Part the Water Veil, kind of as your big finishers in the end game. And Steve Ruben's take on this deck, we've seen some similar decks pop up at the Grand Prix over the past couple weeks, but Steve's take on this deck is actually especially innovative, and we'll get to that in just a minute.
So both players off to a pretty good start here. Kazuyuki with that Sylvan Advocate, and Steve Ruben also with a mana ramp that he wants in the form of Nissa's Pilgrimage.
So meanwhile, Kazuyuki Takimura is playing the Delirium deck that you just heard Mate and Rich talking about here. This is kind of a mid-range, like traditional Jund style deck, but it's leaning on the Emerge synergies to have a really powerful mid-game with cards like Kozilek's Return and Distended Mindbender.
Looks like that Sylvan Advocate getting in there for 2, dropping Steve down to 18. He's going to follow up with the Tireless Tracker. Going to see a land from Steve. Explosive Vegetation. So now that he's continuing to do ramp over the last couple turns, Ian, what do you think he's trying to do? Seems like he's off to the kind of start he wants, right?
This is exactly the start that Steve wants here. He just wants to be ramping. It's not a deck that really cares about interacting with the board in the early turns. All he wants to do is just get more lands on the battlefield, because ultimately his end game is going to be casting Crush of Tentacles and returning everything back to Kazuyuki Takimura's hand. So normally this start from Takamura with a Sylvan Advocate and a Tireless Tracker is going to mean early pressure plus card advantage going into late game, which would be scary for a lot of decks. But I think Steve's deck is actually pretty well equipped to battle against a start like this.
Does look like Ruben in his hand only has a Sylvan Advocate and the Nissa Vastwood Seer, so none of the big payoffs quite yet.
That's definitely true. He's going to be looking for some key cards, but he does have the Nissa, which he'll be able to transform on his following turn and look for even more cards, or else defend himself with a 4/4 token.
Over on the other side, it seems like Takamura with a lot of fiery impulses and not exactly a lot of creatures to use them on.
That's a great point, Gabby, and that's one of the advantages of playing a deck like Steve's, where you're not reliant on early creatures. You just strand all of these creature removal spells in your opponent's hand. So even though Takamura is gaining card advantage with the Tireless Tracker, he's actually losing it by kind of having this, we call it virtual card disadvantage, where he has these cards that he can't cast.
The big attack does drop Steve down at 12. We're going to see a Nissa coming down for Steve, getting a forest out of his deck. There we see Nissa Vastwood Seer over on the right.
So fetching up this land is going to allow Steve to transform his Nissa this very same turn, and then he has the option either to +1 and draw an extra card, or to minus and make a 4/4 token to defend himself with a little bit.
This being the first creature that was played, we'll see the Fiery Impulse, though. Down goes that Nissa with a trigger on the stack. But a nice follow-up of Sylvan Advocate for Steve Ruben.
And Steve actually picked up a really nice card with his last draw step, which is a copy of Part the Water Veil. So pretty soon he's going to be able to start doing some big things with taking extra turns and awakening some lands.
Right, looks like 1 mana Fiery Impulse. 2 of them to take down the Sylvan Advocate, which is large currently.
Yep.
And that Evolving Wilds is going to provide Takamura with a clue. A second one now as well. So some card advantage, nice card advantage being generated here by Takamura. At least those Fiery Impulses were able to take something down eventually, because
Yeah,
they were very much dead in his hand.
And this is actually quite a bit of pressure here coming out from Takamura.
Yep.
The Tireless Tracker and Sylvan Advocate both, sorry, this Advocate not growing yet, but the Tireless Tracker growing a couple times from sacrificing some clues. And this is lethal represented on board next turn if Kazuyuki Takimura can find a 6th land for his Sylvan Advocate. In the meantime, Steve Ruben here, looking at his options. He does have that Part the Water Veil that I mentioned last turn.
And here we see his options. He does have a lot of lands in hand, unfortunately, but then this is Renewal and Part the Water Veil can buy him quite a bit of time.
Yeah, the life gain from Nissa's Renewal actually very, very relevant here.
It looks like that is also the option he's considering casting this turn.
Cards? Cool.
And I think if I'm Steve here, I do like firing off the Nissa's Renewal before going for a Part the Water Veil. Just getting the extra lands on the battlefield will allow him more flexibility in what he does with the following turn and the turn after that. But looks like he does go with the Part the Water Veil here.
He is going with a Part the Water Veil. Now a 6/6 land in play. Part the Water Veil exiles itself, but he gets to take an extra turn. There we see Part the Water Veil. When you are able to awaken, you also get that 6/6 land. Looks like he is firing off that Nissa's Renewal this turn.
So allows him to search up some lands as well as gaining some life. And what Steve's really looking for here, the best card he could draw, I think, would be Pieces of the Puzzle, which I mentioned before, Gabby, this is a little bit of a unusual version of the Blue-Green Crush deck. Some of the other versions I've seen use cards like Oath of Jace and Oath of Nissa because you can rebuy them with Crush of Tentacles, but Steve's opted for a version that's focused very much on instants and sorceries, as well as 4 copies of Pieces of the Puzzle to find those and stock his graveyard.
Yep.
Looks like after that attack, excuse me, after going through a combat, Steve is going to pass it back to Takamura.
So 6/6 Forest here being the defense for Steve Ruben. A little bit of a tenuous defense. If Takamura has another removal spell, that's a lot of pressure coming right back in from Kazuyuki Takimura. However, you know, we did see those 3 Fiery Impulses get fired off early in the game, so it's definitely possible that Takamura is actually low on creature removal now, and this 6/6 might hold up for a little bit here.
Do you think Takamura's removal is not well set for a matchup like this? You know, Steve doesn't have that many targets, but Fiery Impulses aren't exactly taking down that 6/6 land.
I think that's generally true. The fact that he's leaning on red for a lot of his removal here means that it's mostly damage-based and mostly good at killing small creatures. You know, he has cards like Fiery Impulse and Languish, and those just simply aren't effective against these huge awakened lands that Steve is able to muster.
Oh, look, it looks like a Distended Mindbender coming down for Takamura. Also a Vessel of Nascency.
That leaves Steve Ruben with just 1 forest in hand coming into this turn. We will see what he picked up here in just a minute, but, you know, he's really hoping for something big.
4 mana Explosive Vegetation. That's not exactly big.
Yep, not the best thing that he's looking for, but it does thin out his deck a little bit, make it a higher chance that he'll draw a non-land card on a subsequent turn if he can, and as well as getting some more lands on the battlefield. And he has a tremendous amount of land, but in my experience, this deck can use so much mana every turn when you're just doing huge things like chaining Pieces of the Puzzle or, you know, casting a Crush of Tentacles and then recasting some things afterwards. So every land that he gets here is very relevant.
He is going to have to find something meaningful soon, though. This land is currently holding back the fort, but other than that, Steve doesn't have anything going on.
Yeah, he is living off the top, as they say.
like Takamura, considering his options, he's going to decide to crack one of those clues. Scores a tireless tracker and gives him quite a bit more options. Looks like he has a couple of languishes in hand. A grapple with a pass will allow him to buy back something meaningful from the graveyard. Looks like he's going to see what's in the other clue. Attacking with a tireless tracker. This tireless tracker big enough to attack through that land.
Yeah, it looks to be a 7/6 tireless tracker here. So Steve, having to wonder if he wants to trade or not, declines to do so.
You can tell how much pressure the players feel in these games. It's quite visible.
Yeah, I think if I'm Steve here, I just can't wait to see my next draw step. It's basically going to decide the game, what Steve draws next turn. Again, he's looking for something like Pieces of the Puzzle would be one of the best draws he can see. Part the Water Veil also would be great. Would let him see another card as well as make another 6/6 land.
There we see the Pilgrim's Eye getting Takamura another land. All right, Steve.
What
This
did you
is a
draw?
big draw step for you. A Hedron Archive, which he can pop. Let's see what's on top. Another land. No, it's Nissa's Pilgrimage. And an Anticipate.
Okay, well, Anticipate lets him keep fishing.
This is fishing, though. He's spinning his wheels at this point.
I mean, he can still draw into another, say, Part the Water Veil and get another turn to see something else new after that. I think maybe what he's deciding here first is, does he want to cast the Pilgrimage first just to kind of thin out his library a little bit? Or does he want to Anticipate first so that he has the maximum amount of mana left over after he sees the cards with Anticipate?
I mean, he's facing a lot of pressure. At this point, he has 5 life, so it's a little scary, potentially, to try to thin out his deck in the situation. He feels like he might need to buy some time and have all his mana available.
Yeah, he certainly needs to hit something relevant this turn. Otherwise, if he passes the turn without doing anything impactful, he's definitely going to lose the game.
Go ahead.
Looks like a Sylvan Advocate. It is large at this point, but he is facing down quite a board from Takamura.
Yep.
And Liliana, the last hope, is a draw for Takamura this turn. Takamura hasn't even cracked that Vessel of Nascency, and with that clue, too, that Tireless Tracker looks pretty scary.
So the Liliana, I think, is pretty relevant here. One option is to play the Liliana and use its plus ability to shrink the 6/6 land. Would let Takamura attack with both the Distended Mindbender and the big Tireless Tracker. Now, Steve, of course, has options to block, but he'll be losing his creatures and getting further and further behind here.
Yeah, but this is rough. This is the point of the game where you're doing things to not die, but you're not doing things to actually win.
That's absolutely true. So we'll see what Takamura decides to go with here on this turn. Looks like the Liliana is coming down.
It
What's
is
he going to do with
indeed.
it?
There we see Liliana, the last hope, over on the right. It looks like it's ticking up, targeting that land, exactly like you said, Ian. Another land means another clue for Takamura.
Sure.
Looks like both creatures are getting in, Distended Mindbender and Tireless Tracker, and neither of them have any fear.
And this is a forced block here for Steve Ruben. And unfortunately gets no value out of any kind of trading here. These are just jump blocks.
Steve considering how to line up his blocks, but as you said, these are forced at this point.
You know what, Gabby? Actually, I did miss something here. That Sylvan Advocate is pumping up the forest here, so it is an 8/8. And it looks like Kazuyuki Takimura may have missed it
Oh,
too.
man.
Steve explaining here.
+2, 8.
They are indeed talking about exactly that.
6, 7. Yeah. Right. And then it dies because it has 5 damage on it.
Okay, so the player's
All
just
right.
clarifying. Yeah, that forest was an 8/8 with -2/-1 from the Liliana. So 6/7 there, and it does take out the creature that I blocked.
So that definitely went better than Steve wanted it to, but we're He's still pretty far behind here. We'll see if that's going to cost him.
Okay.
Right, it looks like he's going to crack that vessel in this instant. Let's see what's inside. It was an Emrakul. It doesn't seem like it would fit inside the vessel, but little did you expect. Emrakul, the promised end, now in Takamura's hand.
So Steve here, fresh card off the top. What is it? We know he did have Nissa's Pilgrimage in his hand coming into this turn. And it looks like here Steve has picked up Apart the Water Veil. That's
a big draw.
That is a big draw. I mean, don't get me wrong, Steve is way far behind in this game, but this could be the beginning of coming back a little bit here.
Pilgrimage.
So Steve is going to kick this off with Anissa's Pilgrimage. 1 land in hand, 1 in the battlefield. And a 3rd one for good measure. I wonder at which point he's going to run out of basics, but it looks like he's starting to get there.
So we will see that Part the Water Veil with Awaken cast this turn, making another 6/6 Forest. And that'll leave Steve empty-handed, but going into his additional turn, he gets 1 more draw step. And again, he's looking for some more gas. Another Part the Water Veil, or a Crush of Tentacles, or Pieces of the Puzzle would be good cards for him to see here.
I was promised that there would be Crushing and Tentacles in this,
Yeah.
but we haven't seen anything yet.
Not so far, yeah. It seems like Steve's drawn all the ramp portions of his deck and not a lot of the card flow or action. You know, in an ideal world, he'd be chaining together Part the Water Veils and awakening a bunch of lands and getting some attacks in along the way, but here he's been in mostly defensive mode this game.
All right, so this is Steve taking his extra turn thanks to Part the Water Veil.
Okay, here's Pieces of the Puzzle. This is what we were talking about, Gabby. So a new lifeline here for Steve.
Take a look at that. Look at all the reveals. So there we see Pieces of the Puzzle on the right. Not something that you see in Constructed too often. He is going to be able to take 2 instant and or sorcery cards from this. Looks like the choices are Crush of Tentacles and...
I think, do I see a grapple with the past there? Is that the...
There's Nissa's Renewal.
Oh, Nissa's Renewal. Okay, gotcha.
He could take that Anticipate as well if he wanted to.
Yeah, he might want to. I mean, if he can find a way to get that Emrakul back from the graveyard, that's a possibility. Although it looks like, I'm looking at Steve's deck list here, it looks like he is not playing Grapple.
Okay.
If that's the case, unfortunately, that Emrakul is... Got a bit adieu to that Emrakul. So he is going to choose that Tentacles and another Pieces of the Puzzle.
But the Crush of Tentacles is a big game here because he can cast it for its Surge cost, and that'll return all non-land permanents to the owner's hand. And notably, that does not include that Awakened Forest there. That forest stays on the battlefield as a 6/6 creature if he does Crush.
All right, so here's the second Pieces of the Puzzle being chained. It looks like some of our choices are Crush of Tentacles and an Anticipate.
Wow, this is... I'm starting to...
Yeah, this is...
to feel something going on here, Gabby. Like, I thought Steve was dead to rights there. I mean, he basically had no cards in hand and needed to top deck, and he got that...
It did, Ian. He had this turn where he had all these forced blocks. He didn't have a choice.
Yeah, so he went from, like, absolutely nothing to Part the Water Veil to drawing into the pieces of the puzzle that he needs, and now he's chaining pieces of the puzzle together. Of course, his deck is really spell dense right now because he has so many lands on the battlefield, so these pieces of the puzzle and these anticipates are just getting so much value for him.
And this seems to be exactly the kind of game he wants to play. He's going so long. Think of all the things he's going to do this turn. Look at how many lands he has in play so far.
Right. Now, I have to imagine the final act of this turn is going to be surging Crush of Tentacles, making an 8/8 Octopus, and returning Takamura's board all the way back to his hand, and actually even opening up a possibility to attack for 6 damage, too, with that forest.
Nice synergy there. He can cast Surge on that Crush of Tentacles, giving him even more mana to work with this turn.
So I was worried we wouldn't get to see how this deck worked this game, but it turns out that we're seeing him go off.
Steve is doing
this is just
it.
Great.
I also think that Steve might have seen a Den Protector with his Anticipate, so it's possible that he might want to try to buy back that Emrakul.
Oh, that's a great point. Yeah, that is his main deck way of getting back Emrakul, is that 1 Den Protector.
Looks like 5 mana.
Surge.
Here we go. Surge, Crush of Tentacles.
Boom.
Get that octopus. Bam.
I like that Steve came well prepared with his own octopus tokens.
Oh, yeah, you're right. He pulled it out of his deck box.
Always pays to be prepared.
Sylvan Advocate, and man, this game turned around in a pinch.
So that's actually an attack for 8 now with that forest on the back of Sylvan Advocate.
All right.
Oh, that's actually a really relevant thing there too, Gabby, is that he lost his 2 clues that he still had in play from Tireless Tracker, so he doesn't get to get value out of those. And we could see this. I mean, this is really turning around here. I think Steve has another copy of Crush of Tentacles in his hand, so if he survives the turn here, he's going to be able to bounce everything back and come in with that forest again for lethal damage.
Looks like Takamura considering what he wants to take with that grapple with the past.
Okay.
So the big question here is Takamura going to have enough mana to cast Emrakul here?
Yeah, and he took a land because of it.
Yeah.
So let's see what Takamura can pull together this turn. He's facing a lot of pressure from Steve Ruben. And if you're Steve at this point, this is when you get a little bit nervous. You start seeing your opponent gunning up to 13.
Takamura taking a deep breath there, considering his options.
You can see the Emrakul, the Promised End in his hand, but he also has those 2 Languish, and those Languish have been so far pretty dead, though. He might get to a point where he can maybe cast both of them. We can see the first Languish. And there's the second one, indeed. That does take care of those 2, but clear board and still trying to truck his way along onto that Emrakul.
And back to Steve Ruben here. He began the turn with just a Crush of Tentacles in his hand, which Takamura knows he had because it was revealed to pieces of the puzzle, I do believe.
Ruben still has that Crush of Tentacles in hand. The Lumbering Falls is the land for the turn as well, providing him a creature potentially next turn.
And Takamura, we know, still has a copy of Emrakul in his hand, so working up towards that.
So Takamura finding a way to slow down the pace of the game where it seemed like he might be almost dead, but not quite to Emrakul territory yet. We're going to see a Goblin Dark Dwellers flashing back that grapple with the past.
Okay.
Looks like he's taking a Distended Mindbender. Distended Mindbender in hand. He's emerging the Goblin Dark Dwellers, and he's going to be able to take that Crush of Tentacles. Man, Ian, this game has been so swingy.
Yeah, it sure has. I thought for a moment they were just going to see Steve Ruben
Just run
absolutely
away
go
with it?
off and just run away with
He
the
was
game.
going off. He definitely was. Things are turning again. Oh, another Lumbering Fall. So the first one can animate, but Steve Ruben with no cards in hand. Another grapple with a pass from Takamura.
So unfortunately for Steve, his deck is kind of getting pretty thin at this point. His Emrakul's in his graveyard. He's used 2 Part the Water Veils as well as 2 Crush of Tentacles being gone as well. So he's starting to get to the point where he doesn't have that much he can actually draw into. And Takamura just tightening the screws there.
Wow.
Yep, that will do it.
And Takamura takes game 1 here at the World Championship. We got a lot more magic coming for you, though. We'll be back after these messages.
Do you want to play in the next Pro Tour? Qualify through an upcoming Magic Online PTQ. Download Magic Online and learn more at mtgo.com.
Ready to take your game to the next level and start on the path to the Pro Tour? Rise to the challenge and test your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. To find an event near you, visit magic.wizards.com/pptq.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to coverage of the World Championship. We're going to be taking a look into one of our back tables. We have a Reed Duke playing Turbo Emrakul versus Sam Pardee playing Temur Emerge. All right, so taking a look at the board, looks like Anissa over on the Duke side of the battlefield. And on the other side, we have Sam Pardee with a Pilgrim's Eye and an Elder Deep Fiend.
So, Gabby, these are two decks that really broke out at the last Pro Tour here. Temur Emerge, of course, being the deck that Owen Turtenwald used to great success in the top 8, getting second place, I believe. And so Sam Pardee on that Temur Emerge deck. Reed, on the other hand, on what we're calling Turbo Emrakul, which means it's kind of more all-in on ramping up and getting Emrakul out as quickly as possible, instead of just having, like, say, one copy of Emrakul as a value play. It's actually your main game plan.
How are they? How is he ramping up to Emrakul?
Just in general, you know, a lot of the things that we saw, like in Nissa's Pilgrimage, he has copies of Pilgrim's Eye to make sure he hits his land drops, as well as Primal Druids. So it looks like Reed's deck actually has a little bit of a Emerge theme as well.
Combat. Yep.
Looks like both creatures are getting in. And the Nissa did flip, and it's at 4. It looks like Sam is going at Reed and not the Nissa. This is going to drop Duke down to 11.
Sure. Find the forest. Flare forest.
And this is going to get a forest out of Sam Pardee's deck. Getting really close to flipping as well, though not quite yet.
Pass to you.
Looks like Sam's going to pass back to Reed.
Upkeep.
But on the upkeep, sacrificing one Elder Deep Fiend to emerge another one. Tapping down 4 of Reed's lands. Let's see if Reed has anything he can do about this.
So it looks like Sam assuming the kind of tempo role here, going for damage on Reed rather than attacking the Nissa, into emerging one Elder Deep Fiend into another, just shows how much he values tapping down Reed's lands. And I think that's really wise. You know, he knows that Reed's game plan here, his A plan, is just to get up to Emrakul absolutely as fast as he can. And this Elder Deep Fiend could mean the difference between getting Emrakul one turn earlier or one turn later.
Yeah, and I think you're completely correct about that, Ian. It's strange to sacrifice one of your better creatures just to emerge and tap down an opponent's creatures, but here you see Summary Dismissal.
Wow.
It's going to counter also. Wow, this was a big blowout.
Yeah, that just totally alleviates the pressure on Reed's life total there, taking out essentially 2 5/5s away from Sam. I mean, granted, he only would have had the one Elder Deep Fiend, but he had to spend one to make the second one, and then the second one got countered. So Sam down 2 Elder Deep Fiends in that exchange. And to make it even worse, you know, Reed was able to just tap the mana that Sam was planning on tapping down anyway.
Yeah, that was a big turn for Reed. Looks like the Nissa will be ticking down this turn, creating an Ashaya token.
Your turn.
And what's nice about Reed making the Ashaya here is Sam will likely plan on transforming his own Nissa on the following turn, and could tick her up to 4, but Ashaya then threatens Sam's Nissa, which means Pilgrim's Eye needs to get in the way to block. So it just makes things a lot more awkward for Sam, that he needs to be thinking about that Ashaya token and defending against it in some way.
Looks like 3 mana.
Cast Eldrazi Obligator.
Eldrazi Obligator.
Whoa! This is not a card I would expect to
I
see
did
here.
not expect this. I did not see that coming. It looks like Reed didn't quite see that coming either. All right, so Eldrazi Obligator coming down.
And this is a
Paying
3/1
for
haste
its
creature
trigger.
that you can pay an additional 2 mana to steal an opponent's creature.
Oh man,
And,
that Ashaya betraying the Nissa, going to the other side of the battlefield.
and that's an attack for 10 from Sam. Oh no, excuse me. Was that?
That is
Yeah.
game. Sam Pardee takes this
Looks like
game,
that's
and
just
it
game.
looks like our main match is ready as well. So we will be moving back there shortly. That game did not end the way I'd expected it, Ian. That was Eldrazi Obligator doing some serious work.
Go ahead.
Moving back to our main match here, this is Kazuyuki Takimura versus Steve Ruben. Delirium versus Blue-Green Crush. Takamura leads 1-0 so far. Looks like Hissing Quagmire and a couple lands for Steve.
So we saw Steve's deck really do its thing last game, but it took him a while to get there. You know, he ramped all the way up, but then he just kind of ran out of gas for a couple turns. Had that nice top deck to get back into things and started chaining spells together, but ultimately it was a little bit too late, and Takamura was able to take it. We will see if Steve's able to kind of get on a faster road toward that game plan in this game too.
It certainly looked like Steve could make a big comeback there, but the combination of Double Anguish, you know, he had such a commanding board presence that big lands, 8/8 Octopus, but 8/8 Octopus does die to Double Anguish. We're going to see a Den Protector morphed here from Steve Ruben.
So the key way that Steve wants this game to play out is he wants to, in this game, instead be kind of in better shape, be more in a more aggressive stance when he starts casting Part the Water Veil. Last game we saw him use it kind of defensively, not picking up a lot of value from the extra turn, just kind of drawing an extra card and making a 6/6 to sit back and block.
Looks like Liliana giving -2, -1 to that Den Protector. Steve's going to follow up with an Explosive Vegetation. Slowly trucking his way along. Ramping up.
Really nice turn 4 there for Steve. Explosive Vegetation is absolutely the #1 card he wants to be casting on that turn.
And it looks like in hand he actually has quite a bit of action. He has a Jace Unraveler of Secrets. Additionally, a Part the Water Veil.
16.
Sylvan Advocate getting in there for 2. We're going to see another land from Takamura. Take up Liliana, also targeting the Den Protector. Pass back to Steve. Looks like Steve has picked up another copy of Explosive Vegetation.
And Steve with his single copy of Jace Unraveler of Secrets here. This is a really interesting inclusion. I think it's largely a concession to getting an extra card type in his deck for the purposes of Emrakul. But it's on its own, it's a fine standalone Planeswalker, and Planeswalkers do play really well with what we call Time Walk effects, where you take extra turns, Part the Water Veil being the Time Walk effect in Steve's deck. And if he's able to stick this Jace for a couple turns and, you know, start casting Part the Water Veil, he can get a ton of value out of it.
And this Jace on the non-contested board also feels no pressure from Takamura. He's going to cast a couple of Grapple with a Past.
Takamura did
Picking
pick
up his
up
Emrakul.
Yeah, that's really, really important to note there, Gabby.
We're going to see an untap from Takamura. Still a ways away from casting Emrakul, though. The end looms near.
Yeah, Emrakul, in a sense, kind of puts a time limit on Steve Ruben's shenanigans, as it were. If Takamura is able to get up to enough mana plus cards in the graveyard to cast Emrakul, it seems to me like he could just absolutely destroy Steve Ruben with his own cards at that point. Like, this Blue-Green Crush deck, more than a lot of other decks, seems really susceptible to getting Emrakul.
Another Sylvan Advocate coming down here for Takamura. Slowly developing his board, but this game seems to be going just the way Steve wants it so far. Let's see that Den Protector megamorphing, getting back and Anticipate. Nice pickup there for Steve. I know that these players have moved post-boardy, and do you think either of them are significantly favored?
That is a fantastic question. I want to say sideboarding probably favors Takamura a little bit more since he has access to black discard effects. Cards like Distended Mindbender, he has an extra copy of. And, you know, just generally things like Pick the Brain, Transgress the Mind seem really effective against Steve Ruben's deck because Steve's deck is so much ramp and so few action cards that discard is really effective against that type of strategy.
We definitely saw the pieces of the puzzle bring Steve back in a game, even though he ultimately ended up losing, in a game where it looked like he was definitely dead, and if he manages to take something like pieces of the puzzle away, that could be pretty brutal. Looks like another Vegetation from Steve. We're going to see a pass back to Takamura. Looking at Takamura's hand, we have a couple of lands that Emrakul that was picked up earlier in the game. A Sylvan Advocate and a Hissing Quagmire, so he's sitting safely here for now.
Yep.
And as far as where the game state lies right now, I think things are looking much, much better for Steve Rubin this game than they were last game. He just has a much more proactive start, right? He has the Den Protector on the battlefield, putting a little bit of pressure on, as well as this Jace that's been uncontested so far, just drawing extra cards each turn, giving him some selection. So he's definitely transitioning into this this end game that his deck has in a much better position. He's not on the back foot like he was in the last game.
So something to consider here is that Liliana the Last Hope, which is slowly creeping up to ultimate here.
That is indeed true.
Looks like Hissing Quagmire attacking the Jace. Let's see what Steve has to say about that.
Yeah, Steve has the option to block here with his Den Protector. It does mean that he wouldn't have any creatures on the battlefield to pressure Liliana. He does have a Lumbering Falls as well, which is an option. And he's also getting close to the point where he can cast Part the Water Veil with Awaken and actually get in an attack that very same turn. So it looks like he does end up trading here. Opts to protect Jace, thinks that he can handle the Liliana in other ways, and I think he can too.
Steve getting a land count. Looks like he might pick up another Anticipate from the Anticipate.
No, that's good. Yeah.
It's also worth noting, when this blue-green Crush deck does start chaining together Part the Water Veil, it can end the game very abruptly. I think it's not necessarily without reach for Steve Rubin to end the game this very same turn. Well, not the same turn, but before Takamura gets another turn.
Yeah, in his
there.
sequence of turns.
Right, he does go for the Part the Water Veil. Island comes in for 6 damage.
Yeah, and the Island coming and attacking Takamura and not Liliana. Let's see, untap another turn. Chase, and he's playing so fast. Bounce that. Another Part the Water Veil, make another 6/6, and that is game. Steve Rubin pushes this onto a game 3. We'll be moving back to a matchup between Chanta and Marcio Carvalho. The players are playing Blacklane Delirium versus Band Company. Both players are 3-0 so far.
Yeah. JC Tao, of course, the winner of Pro Tour Oath of the Gatewatch earlier this year, and Marcio Carvalho, our draft master from the Pro Tour all throughout the year.
You are 18, 12.
Are you 18, Jason?
I'm 18.
Well, it looks like we came in at a very interesting spot. There's an Emrakul, the Promised End, over on Tao's side of the battlefield.
One card? One card.
So let's see what exactly is going on. We will shortly find out what that token on the battlefield is for you.
White,
2/2?
Yeah, with the emblem.
Looks like that is a 2/2 ally from a Gideon previously.
Gideon perished, apparently fighting against Emrakul, and all that's left is that little soldier.
And I have to imagine we are on Marcio's additional turn after having gotten Emrakul, just given that JC's all tapped out, Emrakul's in the battlefield, but doesn't seem to be controlling Marcio's turn.
All right, looks like a Noose Constrictor coming down for Marcio, followed by a Tireless Tracker. Interesting matchup here, Ian. We saw a lot of this at the Pro Tour. Black-Green Delirium versus Band Company.
Yep, it's really interesting that these Black-Green Delirium decks can kind of go a lot of different directions. We saw some that were faster, some that were slower, some that were more controlling, some that were more proactive. So I haven't taken a deep dive into JC's deck yet, but he's clearly some flavor of Black-Green.
Morph coming down. It's a Den Protector. Getting back that Grasp of Darkness, taking down that Noose Constrictor. And that's going to do it. Emrakul attacks, and that is game. This is going to force a game 3 between the two players.
So we are going to jump in here, I believe, on table D.
Yeah, this is Reed Duke versus Sam Pardee. Let's take a look. So the players are currently playing game 3. Not a lot going on the board. Sam Pardee does have that Jace and that Nissa, so likely having 2 Planeswalkers soon.
Plus Jace. Yeah. Done with my turn after that.
So Sam looking in, he's in the better shape on board with a Planeswalker and another potential Planeswalker coming pretty soon. But Reed has lots of mana, and that's what his deck wants to do. And he is tapping out here. Could this be? It is Emrakul.
Oh, it is Emrakul.
End of turn. I cast grapple.
Looks like Sam is going to fire off that grapple. Let's see what he finds.
For a second.
Yep, wisely using the grapple, well, he can decide what to get back with it before Reed takes his turn.
And Sam has to sequence things here. Also knowing that Reed is going to try to do as much damage as he possibly can. Yeah, so we'll give you updates of what's going on in this game, but we are moving back to our main match, Takamura versus Ruben.
How many cards do you have left? 4. Okay.
All right, and our players are underway.
Good.
Forest and Lumbering Falls. Ooh, and Takamura has a Chandra in hand.
Good.
It's a card that could end the game very quickly. Looks like Sylvan Advocate. Things are developing nicely for Takamura.
So Steve Rubin with a little bit of a slower draw this game than last game. He would love to be casting Nissa's Pilgrimage on his turn 3 here.
Ooh, Transgress the Mind, and this is the black discard you were talking about. Taking a look at Steve's hand, the pieces of the puzzle, Part the Water Veil, and that Nissa's Pilgrimage. Interesting choices here.
Yeah, I have to imagine he's going to go with the Nissa's Pilgrimage. It's just the best turn 3 play for most of these ramp decks, and I think just denying him that that ideal curve is what Takamura wants to do. I mean, there is some argument to taking out Apart the Water Veil. There are only so many copies of that card in Steve's deck, and denying him one, really does hurt his long game, make him have to dig a lot deeper to find his next copies.
It'll be interesting to see how aggressive Takamura wants to get here. Looking at his hand, he's got a Chandra, grapple with a Past Transgress, and to the Slaughter, so he has a pretty reactive hand. He can't exactly, hope to play a very short game in that sense. Takamura sweating the choices here.
Now there is also pieces of the puzzle in Steve Rubin's hand, which you can make a case for that as well. It's a 2-for-1. It's going to find Steve the cards that he needs to kind of keep churning through his deck. So there's definitely an argument to taking the pieces as well.
And that is what he's going to go for. Transgress the Mind takes care of the pieces of the puzzle. Steve will have the ramp available and also the Part the Water Veil, but he won't be able to use that pieces of the puzzle to seek for more instants or sorceries.
And this is always one of those tough decisions you have to make, Abby, when you're playing a deck with black discard spells, where you can try to take the card that's best for your opponent in the short term and just try to leverage kind of the tempo advantage and get ahead in the short term, or you can go for the most powerful card, or you can go for the card that's going to draw them into more cards. And these are very different branching paths depending on how you want to approach the game, and depending on what you pick, that's going to influence your game plan going forward.
You're totally right about that, Ian. It looks like a Traverse Sylvan is going to be cast here for Takamura. No Delirium yet, but it will provide an extra land for him.
And Steve fires off that Nissa's Pilgrimage. So we see Steve in a spot where he doesn't have a lot of action in his hand. He still has that Part the Water Veil, but that alone isn't really doing much for him in the short term. He had the pieces of the puzzle stripped out of his hand, and so he's going to be hoping to top deck some more card flow, probably. Something like a Jace or a Nissa or another pieces of the puzzle. Takamura, in the meantime, chipping away with that Sylvan Advocate.
Yeah, and an Evolving Wilds, and nothing else for now. Looks like an Explosive Vegetation for Steve. Here we see getting an island 2 islands, actually.
So what I see Takamura doing here is he had traversed for a land, but instead played the Evolving Wilds on the following turn, and I think that's because he wants to... I think he got a mountain with the Traverse and is going to search up a mountain with the Evolving Wilds, and he's going for that double red that he'll need to play Chandra on turn 6. Chandra, an important card because it can end the game, as you said, so quickly, as well as providing a stream of card advantage, if that's what Takamura needs. And it's that type of pressure that will let Takamura close out a game before Steve Rubin can really get his deck engine totally running.
Okay.
Getting an update from one of our back tables, it looks like Ray Duke won the match between him and Pardee.
No huge surprise there, given that when we last saw, he
What we
was
saw at the
in the
very end of that
process of
game.
resolving Emrakul on, like turn 6 or something.
It looks like the Grapple of the Past is being cast by Takamura, deciding what he wants to get back from his graveyard. Looks like a Nissa is what's being bought back. We're going to see an untap from him. Oh, an Emrakul, the Promised End, is the draw. Still a ways away, but we're getting closer to that Chandra. Nissa coming down. It's going to provide a Takamura with another land. This time it's going to be a forest. He's going to go ahead and play that. Yeah, it looks like he's going to go straight ahead, play it, and going to pass it back to Steve.
So importantly, this means that Takamura will have access to Chandra on his next turn. He does have that 6th land in the form of a basic mountain in his hand. So the pressure is really on Steve here to assemble something quickly. And we know he has that Part the Water Veil left over, but again, he doesn't want to be casting that without getting a lot of value out of it. He doesn't just want to cycle and take an extra turn and just draw 1 card off the top of his deck. He really wants to be able to use a lot of mana or start Awakening with the Part the Water Veil, and he's just not quite there yet.
But Steve has to be worried about this. He saw him traverse for that mountain forever and a lifetime ago now. Knows that there's 2 mountains in hand at this point, so... Doesn't do anything for this turn, but it looks like that Chandra may be coming down to the battlefield soon.
And the 6th land also levels up that Sylvan Advocate, so this could be 12 damage coming in potentially this turn.
Takamura considering his choices. It looks like he's also picked up an Ishkana Graph Widow along the way. We'll get confirmation whether or not he has delirium or not, but that might be bringing along some baby spiders.
So Kazuyuki, just thinking about what Steve Rubin could have. I mean, it's certainly possible that Steve has counterspells out of his sideboard that Takamura wants to think about. Of course, if he thought Steve Rubin had nothing, I have to imagine he'd just slam the Chandra here and attack for 12, knocking Steve down to 2, leaving himself with a diversity of threats. But decides for the perhaps more conservative route, just gets in with the creatures. This will be 6 damage if Steve takes it.
Another update from one of our back tables. Ian, it looks like Marcio Carvalho has won his match against Jia Chantao.
So Takamura just actually passed the turn back. Did nothing with his mana instead. Probably fearing a counterspell from Steve Rubin. And it looks like Steve has picked up a 2nd copy of Part the Water Veil, so he could really do some big things this turn.
Oh, and he's firing off that To the Slaughter. That poor land was not long for this world. Steve.
And that's a really big deal.
Yeah. Steve does get a turn here, but no more 6/6 land for him. And there you see To the Slaughter. Not exactly sure how you're supposed to send the land to the slaughter, but it did happen here.
So that really took the wind out of Steve's sails. I think he was hoping to go for a Part the Water Veil into another Part the Water Veil and just get a huge attack in.
Well, he does have another Part the Water Veil, and he has another 6/6, so he's going to be taking a 3rd turn here.
And that was not an attack from the land. That was 9 mana to Awaken, so the land actually tapped to Awaken itself. So Takamura is still sitting at a healthy 20. Steve Ruben here on his third turn
at
in a
this
row.
point, yeah.
And he's got, looks like an Anticipate and a Nissa's Renewal in his hand. So likely...
Importantly, too, the Water Veils exile themselves. So also Takamura now kind of has a pretty good idea of what he's going up against.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's only perhaps one more Part the Water Veil in the deck. And that's going to make Steve's win condition a lot harder here. He's going to have to kind of grind it out a little bit more with either Sylvan Advocates and Lumbering Falls or Crush of Tentacles.
And this is Renewal is going to gain Steve Ruben quite a bit of life, though. Getting another couple lands out of his deck.
I think what really happened here is that Steve felt pressured to go off a little bit sooner than he would have wanted to. I think if he had one more turn of being at a comfortable life total, he could have gotten up to that 10th land and tried to go for Part the Water Veil and an attack the same turn into another Part the Water Veil and another attack, and then a third attack. But between having to go off with 9 lands and also the To the Slaughter, it really just made that sequence a lot less effective than he had planned on it being, I think.
And that's exactly what you were talking about in the previous game, too, how this game, specifically the blue-green Crush deck, it's slow, and then suddenly it chains all these things together, and it actually puts the game away very quickly.
So now here we are back on Takamura's turn. He does still have that Chandra Flamecaller in his hand. Could represent a bunch of damage. It's noteworthy that Steve Ruben did attack with his land on the previous turn, not leaving it up to block, relying on the life that he gained from Nissa's Renewal instead and trying to pressure Kazuyuki Takimura's life total. I think Steve realizes that with 2 Part the Water Veils gone, he actually needs to get moving and try to end the game pretty quickly because he's not really going to have that explosive turn where he can burst Takamura down anymore.
It looks like this is the turn that Chandra is coming down. 6 mana for Takamura.
And this represents an attack for 12. Steve Ruben at 13 would knock him down to 1 and give Steve one last turn to try to put something together.
All right, so it looks like Takamura is definitely saying, do you have it? A big attack from Takamura. And that's a nice synergy. After attacking with a Nissa, he is going to be able to transform it as well.
And goes ahead and makes that 4/4 Ashaya token.
All right. Steve Ruben at 3, Anticipate. Let's see what he can find off the top.
So what does he need to find here? I think he needs to find another Part the Water Veil and into a Crush of Tentacles would do it. Or at least get him very close.
Well, we'll see. He had that Anticipate and a big draw step here. He found Emrakul.
Wow.
Cutting
That
up in the
is certainly
Riverlands. That
another
is
angle.
a big draw. Let's see.
Wow, this is huge too, because with that Chandra Flamecaller on the battlefield, Steve Ruben can actually -5 on the next turn and just wipe away Kazuyuki's entire board.
Wow. Emrakul the Promise then coming down for Steve Ruben, and then he found it right in the nick of time. It looks like Takamura with a Graph Widow, also another Emrakul.
Yeah, I think so.
And it looks like Takamura has a Pick the Brain in hand, so Steve just confirming he wants to see what he can do with the ability of controlling Takamura's turn, what he can do with his Pick the Brain.
And that would be a huge deal, because if Steve Ruben could use Takamura's own Pick the Brain to target Takamura, he could take away Takamura's Emrakul. As things stand, he actually can't do that. And the trouble for Steve here is if he leaves Takamura in a position where Takamura is able to cast an Emrakul on the following turn, then Steve's going to be right back to square one, or just dead, depending on how things shake out.
All right, so Steve deciding what he wants to do with Takamura's turn. And this is where we see those weird situations with Emrakul's facing off.
That's right. And there's awkward things here too, like Takamura wants, or Steve Ruben wants to get rid of Takamura's Chandra Flamecaller, but in doing so, will actually put a Planeswalker in Takamura's yard, which I think will basically guarantee that the Emrakul could come out the following turn.
So Ishkana Graph Widow being cast, and then the Chandra -5 to kill everything that was on the board. The Shaya is dead as well. Steve's going to pass back, and now Takamura left with a mere Nissa.
So that was a pretty great Emrakul turn for Steve Ruben. The problem is he was far enough behind, and the fact that Takamura has Emrakul in his own hand, Takamura could just get right back into this game.
Nissa takes up, finds a Hissing Quagmire, gets it in play. And Emrakul, the Promised End, coming down for Takamura. Steve says okay, and now Takamura is going to be controlling Steve Ruben's next turn. Looks like he's going to fire off and anticipate before the end of his turn.
Hoping to find something not dangerous or something that could, kind of withstand Takamura's meddling, as it were.
It's weird when the players have to pick cards and do things considering that their next turn is about to be controlled by not
It's very weird,
them.
yeah. Sometimes you're like, using a removal spell on your second best creature so they don't kill your best creature, and weird things like that. And super awkward here in that Takamura is at 14 life and not 13. Is very relevant here as the Emrakuls face off. So that was the end of end of Takamura's turn. Steve Ruben cast Anticipate, found something. Now this is Takamura controlling Steve Ruben's turn, taking a look at his hand.
And it looks like Steve did pick up that Jace from that Anticipate. His draw for the turn was a Forest, though.
Okay, so Jace is actually a pretty interesting pickup because it's kind of resilient to Takamura messing with it in the sense that if Takamura casts Ruben's Jace and bounces Ruben's own Emrakul, then Steve Ruben can get another Emrakul the following turn. I guess Jace could... I think Jace bounces any creature, so it could bounce the Forest, I believe.
It is target creature.
But then the trouble with that line, Gabby, is it still leaves a Jace at 3 loyalty, which can then bounce Takamura's Emrakul, or even Steve's own Emrakul for another recast on the Emrakul. So Jace bounces Forest, Emrakul's trade, and the reason the Emrakul's traded there is if they didn't trade, then Steve Ruben could untap with Jace, bounce Takamura's Emrakul, and attack with Lumbering Falls and his own Emrakul, so that would have been lethal there. So Takamura wisely sees that and does trade the Emrakuls.
Now he's tapped out, though, and Steve does have a couple of Lumbering Falls that he can do with. Takamura on his hand, he only has that Pick the Brain left. So Takamura really banking on this Nissa, hopefully drawing him some action. But aside from that, he doesn't have that much going on. And he had to trade with Emrakuls, like you said. It would have been very bad if he didn't.
But Steve's still in a decent spot here. We'll see what he drew for the turn, but he does get to attack with Lumbering Falls and take out Takamura's Nissa. He knows what's in Takamura's hand. He knows it's just to pick the brain. So things have kind of settled into a spot where, we went from lethal being threatened on both sides to actually now Steve Ruben is kind of taking control of the game with a Jace and might be able to kind of grind things out over a couple turns with attacks from Lumbering Falls.
Yeah, so it's looks like that Lumbering Falls did get in.
So
Jace also slowly ticking up.
Big potential draw from Takamura here. He really needs to find something very fast. Steve Ruben is drawing 2 cards a turn and has Lumbering Falls coming in. And wow, it looks like there in Steve Ruben's hand, he has picked up a copy of Summary Dismissal, which is really going to cover his bases against whatever Takamura tries to put together. There's the Pick the Brain, I think, is coming out here, which Ruben just allows to resolve.
Yeah, so Pick the Brain takes away that Summary Dismissal. Takamura gets to see if he can take another copy of it. There's another one. And Ruben left with just 2 forests.
And
Misha.
it's interesting to me that Ruben let the Pick the Brain resolve. I wonder if the reason for that is to shuffle his library, because he has cast a few Anticipates as well as I think Scryed with Jace. So he may know that there are cards on the bottom of his library that he wants to have another chance to draw into. That's one possibility there.
That's a really good point, Ian, especially since he didn't have any other cards in his hand that were worth taking.
Right. That, I mean, I could be missing something there, but that is at least a possibility to be thinking about.
The To the Slaughter is going to force that Jace to go to the graveyard. I'm going to see an untap from Steve. There you see the To the Slaughter. It's in this case in particular, it's pretty nice because it's both a creature and or planeswalker. So
just an
with
explosive
delirium too.
vegetation picked up there for Steve Rubin, but he does get to attack again with Lumbering Falls. And things have really settled into a top deck war. I mean, what a game this has turned out to be.
Oh
Gabby.
yeah,
Like, just the way it's evolved.
the grind is real.
From like Takamura beating down and Steve Rubin, ramping and trying to barely hold on with the Part the Water Veil, into that surprise To the Slaughter that really threw off Steve Rubin's plans, into Emrakul's on both sides, into now neither player has a hand and we're just going off the top. This is like every facet of Magic all in one game.
A Dragon Master Outcast from Takamura?
Wow. I have to imagine that's out of the sideboard, and that's a pretty awesome sideboard card here. If that's the case.
But pieces of the puzzle being cast here, and it looks like you might start chaining these together too. Another pieces of the puzzle on top. Steve picks that one. None of the other ones. He lets them go to the graveyard.
Yeah, unfortunately, only one total instant or sorcery in that pile. But here comes a second chance. And also pretty unfortunate there. It looks like he just hits a couple of ramp spells.
Yeah, these are a little bit of a brick. Explosive Vegetation and a Pilgrimage. That's really not what Steve was looking for here.
So I don't think we've seen Crush of Tentacles at all this game so far. I mean, it's possible that maybe Steve trimmed some of them or sideboarded a couple copies out. I'm not sure, but I have to imagine he's at least got some copies left in his library. And just hasn't found them yet. But that's the card that he really needs to see here. Otherwise, that Dragon Master Outcast is going to close out the game really quickly.
Steve Rubin casting those ramp spells. Thinning out his deck slowly. And he actually has only one forest left in his entire library. That's how many ramp spells he's used this game. Looks like that Lumbering Falls animating and getting in there. Upkeep. Dragon Master Outcast trigger. Oh, and the players actually only have 30 seconds left on their clock, so this match has been a grind fest.
It's coming down to it. I think we will see this game conclude before turns are up, though.
It looks like we might. Let's see what Steve can piece together here.
Looks
He drew Crush?
He drew a Crush that turn? Okay. So this is super relevant. The life totals being 11-2 here. So Steve will be able to Nissa's Pilgrimage, which he wisely left himself with so that he'd have a spell to cast in case he drew Crush of Tentacles. That allows the Surge cost to be paid, which makes the 8/8 Octopus. Lumbering Falls gets to crack in for 3. That drops Takamura down to 8, which means the Octopus is lethal next turn, which means if Takamura bricks this turn and just casts the Dragon Master Outcast again, now it has to chump block.
Looks like Vessel of Nascency. Takamura's going to lead this turn.
Wow.
With that Vessel, and man, this game is turning around. Looks like you might be turning the corner, Ian.
Yeah, it's all going to come down to what this Vessel sees. There's, I think, a Sylvan Advocate, so that's going to be... that's going to be enough to provide an extra chump blocker so that the Dragon Master Outcast can survive the turn, and that could allow Takamura to close things out.
Yeah, it looks like the choices are Pilgrim's Eye and... Oh, and Takamura's actually at 5 lives so right now.
Oh, okay. Just getting the life totals updated there for you all.
So Takamura thinking about how he wants to sequence this. Looks like he might be taking that Sylvan Advocate, trying to figure out how he wants to block next turn. Yes, and that is going to be his choice.
And the reason this is so important is if Takamura didn't find a creature there, again, all he'd be able to do is just replay that Dragon Master Outcast and be in chump block mode. But the Sylvan Advocate really changes that dynamic because now the Advocate can jump in front of the Octopus, and that'll allow Takamura to make a dragon off the Dragon Master Outcast.
So Takamura plays out his entire hand, all his land, Dragon Master Outcast, and Sylvan Advocate. Oh, it's Ulamog!
Traverse for Ulamog.
That was nuts. And then we see the handshake. Steve Ruben takes this game. Wow, he crushed Takamura's dreams.
Dude, I didn't even know he had Ulamog in his deck. I think that came out of the sideboard, actually.
It did. And I mean, it's so nice with Traverse the Ulvenwald because you can just seek it whenever you need it.
Wow. That was an awesome match. Those were 3 of the best games that I've seen in quite a while. So many moments where it just came down to Steve Ruben having to top deck. And like having to top deck.
No, he needed to top deck right there.
Yeah.
And there were so many times, it's such a great match because so many times it looked like maybe his deck wasn't going to do what it wanted to do. And then he just started chaining pieces of the puzzle, Traverse the Ulvenwald, Ulamog, and you win.
Yeah, really amazing to watch.
Insane. Very good. We have a lot more Magic lined up for you, though, so don't go anywhere. Let's send it over to Rich over, I guess they're on the balcony?
In the balcony, yeah.
We are, in fact, in deck. How appropriate is that? My word. More Crush of Tentacles action coming your way later in the afternoon. Well, that puts Steve Rubin, talk about hard work, to 2-2. But right now there are 2 co-leaders at 4-0. One of those is Mike Sigrist, and the other one is waiting for us in the feature match area. Here's Brian David Marshall with Portugal's Marcio Carvalho.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here with Marcio Carvalho. And Marcio, as we stand here in the Paramount Theater, we are surrounded by images of a new plane, Kaladesh. And you have to be a little sad about this because you've done pretty well on the plane of Innistrad in this limited format.
Yeah, Innistrad has been good for me. Like, I'm 50-0 now on this format. I didn't lost any round at the Shadows Innistrad or Eldritch Moon, so I'm a little sad, yeah, of course.
But of course, as a drafter, you're very excited to get to a new format as well.
And I want to know all the new cards too. I love to draft, so the new draft is going to be fun too, for sure.
But in the meantime, so you go 6-0 at a Pro Tour, 6-0 Pro Tour, and now you're 3-0 in the Eldritch Moon draft format here at the Magic World Championships. For people at home trying to figure out how do I win in this draft format, give me one piece of advice for someone trying to replicate this incredible run of success you've had with this format.
Just draft curvy decks. Like, don't if you don't have curve, it's not gonna work in this draft. So draft curve, and if you can get some mythics are always good.
And so when you say curve, you're talking about 2 drops, 3 drops.
2 drop, 3 drop, 4 drop. Don't like have like all good cards, but only 3 to 5. You're gonna lose the game because the tempo is really important in this format.
All right, well, there you have it. He's the draft master. He's 15-0 on Innistrad, so you should take his advice, look at your mana curve, and make sure you can keep up with the tempo of the game. We're sending it back to Rich at the news desk.
The Draft Master is mastering worlds right now. 4-0 for Marcio Carvalho, 4-0 for Mike Sigrist. They are your 2 co-leaders right now. Waiting for us over at the Deck Tech Studios, Matej Big Z Zatlkai. He's got a player who right now is at 2-2. It's Oliver Chew. Here he is.